Pardon me for interrupting, Doc. Is this the party of Mrs. and Miss Peterson?
It is indeed.
I have here for you an invitation each from Dr. Chiron. It is for a dinner gathering at his home this Wednesday evening. That is 3 days from now. Dr. Chiron would be pleased if you respond by tomorrow if you wish to attend.
Thank you. We will be sure to do that.
Dr. Chiron will be delighted, I'm sure. Excuse the interruption.
Of course. Isn't that good of Dr. Chiron? He is always so thoughtful, and his cook is really quite exceptional.
He really is a gentleman. Oh, Mother, listen to how charming his invitation is. Dear Miss Peterson, I would be honored if you and your mother could grace a dinner gathering at my home Wednesday evening with your presence. If you wish to attend, I'd be most grateful if you could notify me, by whichever means is most convenient for you, by the following date of this invitation is delivered. I remain, as always, your obedient servant, Robert Chiron. Isn't that sweet of him?
Yes, indeed. In fact, if this invitation had come from anyone else other than Dr. Chiron, I would advise you not to go.
But why?
Dr. Chiron is a true gentleman, and I do trust his morals. However, coming from someone else, such as young Mr. Toronto, such sweet words would be deemed highly improper. Remember, my dear, there are many unscrupulous young men in this world who would happily take advantage of a pure-hearted young lady such as yourself.
I would like to know if you would come to banquet with me this Saturday evening.
How very kind of you to invite me. Unfortunately, my sources do not come cheaply.
I don't have any cash right now, but I could pay you back. I promise.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chiron, but I require cash, not promises.
Oh well, I suppose I better go then, Miss Dragonwick.
good evening, Mr. Chiron.
No, that's not me.
But Mr. Chiron. Good evening, Miss Dragonwick. I hope I'm not disturbing you.
Not at all, sir. Are you looking for an escort?
Not at this time, thank you, miss. Actually, I have for you an invitation from Dr. Robert Chiron. He is hosting a dinner gathering this Wednesday evening and would be pleased if you could attend.
My, that is very generous of Dr. Chiron, and I would be glad to attend. But I will require some form of transportation. I suppose you have given an invitation to Raymond Beaumont downstairs.
Yes, that is, I put one in his letterbox, as he didn't seem to be in. I would have given one to young Mr. Chiron as well, but he left too quickly.
He probably thought it was someone to whom he owed money. May I ask who else is invited?
Apart from yourself, Mr. Beaumont and Mr. Chiron, I believe invitations have been sent to Mrs. and Miss Peterson, to Lord and Lady Carnoustie, and to Mr. Willie Tomintoul. One was sent to Reverend Moneymusk, but he will be leaving for Africa on the day in question.
A charming group, even without the Reverend. Well, I shall speak to Beaumont in the morning. If he agrees to transport me to this gathering, I will send word to Dr. Chiron that I would be delighted to attend.
Wonderful, miss. Good evening.
One moment, sir. I want to make this trip worth your while.
Why, thank you, Miss Dragonwick. Thank you very much.
Not at all. Good night, sir.
Good night to you, Miss Dragonwick, and thank you again.
Beside the seaside, I do like to be beside the sea, for the sun's always shining as I make my way, and the brass bands play Tara-ra-boom-dee. So just let me be beside the seaside, I'd be beside myself with glee, for there are lots of girls beside I should gladly be beside the seaside, beside the sea. Ah, Turnberry, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Mr. Tomintoul. And yourself?
Can't complain, Turnberry. I can't complain. Well, that is, I could complain, but that would be lying. And I always think lying is a waste of time, don't you?
Well, naturally, sir, I always believe in doing what is right.
Oh, pooh! If one did what was right all the time, you would never have any fun. Don't tell me that you've never had fun in your life.
Oh, well, sir.
Now, Turnberry, if you let him, he'll go on all night.
Ha! Uncle Robert, how are you, old bean?
Quite well, thank you, young being.
Ha! Uncle, you never miss a trick, do you?
And neither do you. You have managed to arrive, well before anyone else, as always. Don't lag about, Turnberry. Put Mr. Tomintoul's accessories away.
Would you care for a spot of tea, Mr. Tomintoul?
No, why not? Although I wouldn't say no to a glass of wine, mind you.
Willie, if you start drinking my expensive wine now, you will fall asleep halfway through dinner. Bring Mr. Tomintoul's tea into the sitting room when you finish. Thank you, Turnberry.
Good evening, milady. Good evening, my lord.
Good evening, Sir Mary. Good evening, my lady.
Good evening,
Miss
Lord.
Christina. May I take you shopping, my lady?
You certainly may.
So lovely weather we're having.
Your hat, my lord.
Why, you've dropped something.
Eh?
You've dropped something, sir.
Ah, grazie. I was wondering where that went. My lady. Oh, good evening, Mr. Chiron.
Turnberry. Good evening, Ah, Lord Hardesty.
Ah, it's a young Merlot.
Hello, Mr. Chiron. How have you been?
Very well. How much
Lady Carnoustie, always a pleasure.
Pleasure to see you again.
My lord, it's always an honor.
Dr. Chiron, it is my pleasure to be here in your house with you and your friend.
Oh, well, I'm so pleased that you were able to join me on such short notice.
My lady and I have been looking forward to coming. Oh, good evening, Mrs. Peterson. Miss Peterson.
Good evening, Turnberry.
Good evening, Mrs. Peterson.
Christina?
May I take your shawl, Mrs. Peterson?
Oh, thank you. That won't be necessary, Turnberry. Oh, that Mr. Tomentor is here. Well, I suppose he is Dr. Chiron's nephew. But anyway, I should expect you to behave as properly as possible in his presence.
Of course, Mother.
I'm very glad to hear it.
Thank you, Dr. Chiron, for having us tonight.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. It's a great pleasure. Pardon me, my neck.
Hello, Uncle Robert. I was wondering, could you lend me some money?
No, I will not, you daring wretch. Pay me back all the money you already owe me. Then I might consider lending you more.
Oh. Oh well.
Mrs. Peterson, how wonderful to see you both. Miss Peterson, how good of you to come. I'm delighted to see you. Miss Peterson, I swear you are more beautiful every time I see you.
Oh, Dr. Chiron, really?
It's true. Please make yourselves comfortable.
So good to see you too, Dr. Chiron.
Well. Appears that Uncle Robert has had the sense to invite somebody interesting. Miss Peterson, may I say how beautiful you look this evening?
Why, thank you, Mr. Tomentool.
I think about you often, you know.
Do you really, Mr. Tomentool?
I do.
Oh, good evening, Mr. Belmore, Miss Dragonwick.
Oh, no. How could that vulgar woman have forced an invitation into this respectable gathering?
May I take your
Perhaps two interesting people.
Miss Dragonwick, how good of you to come.
How good of you to invite me, Dr. Chiron. However, you must mostly thank Beaumont here, for he allowed me to share his taxi.
Wonderful. Beaumont, my dear fellow, how are you? Thank you for coming, and thank you for bringing Miss Dragonwick.
Oh, the pleasure is entirely mine, I assure you.
I can imagine. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would all care to follow me to the dining room, we shall shortly be served another of Mrs. Turnberry's succulent meals, a menu of which I hope you will all approve.
Hear, hear!
Ladies and gentlemen,
Are you coming, Mr. Tomontoul?
Right away, Miss Dragonwick. Thank you very much, Christina. Mrs. Turnberry has outdone herself again, I dare say. Please give your compliments to your wife, Turnberry. This is another fabulous meal.
Uncle Robert, where are we getting the champagne?
Willie. Hold on.
My patience is coming to an end.
Yes, well, how much patience you had to begin with is highly debatable, Willie.
That's not the question. Bless you, Turnberry.
Ah, this is nice.
It's come at last, Uncle Robert. Thank you, Turnberry.
These are very tasty. Thank you for Mr. Turnberry. Thank you very much.
I assume, Dr. Chiron, that the Reverend Moneymusk has gone once more abroad as he is not present.
That is quite correct, Lady Carnoustie. He...
Oh, so much the better. It's a boring old crow and no mistake.
He left this very morning for Africa.
Off to hunt wild elbows, no doubt.
Wild elbows.
Perhaps if Misters Chiron and Tomontoul would oblige us by acting their age.
Sorry, Uncle.
Thank you, Murdo. I shall accept your apology for the both of you.
Dr. Chiron, excuse me?
Mrs. Peterson?
Well, I know this will most probably sound silly, as I am sure I have asked you before, but I suppose I have just forgotten. I know you are a doctor of the mind, but what is your principal field in?
Ah, Mrs. Peterson, I specialize in the study and treatment of phobias.
Phobias, Dr. Chiron.
Irrational fears, Miss Peterson. Nearly all of us have them, which makes them all the more a fascinating subject. They come in different degrees in each person, from a minor nervousness to a paralyzing terror. And the number of different phobias is truly extraordinary. There is zoophobia, fear of animals, hemophobia or hematophobia, fear of blood, the very common claustrophobia or clithrophobia, fear of small enclosed spaces.
Oh, that would be my phobia, Dr. Chiron.
As I said, Mrs. Peterson, claustrophobia is one of the most common.
to name only a few more, there is scotophobia, nyctophobia, acluophobia, and ligophobia, which are all different names for fear of the dark. There is dipsophobia, fear of drinking and drunkenness, which, dare I say, is obviously not the personal phobia of my dear eldest nephew.
I'm proud of it, I am too.
There is even, imagine this, phobophobia, a fear of being frightened. And then, of course, there is my own personal fear, arachnophobia, fear of spiders.
You have a phobia, Dr. Chiron?
Oh yes, Mrs. Peterson.
But surely you would be able to cure your own phobia.
Phobias are difficult things to cure, Mrs. Peterson, which makes the act all the more worth trying. And I have been able to lessen my phobia in recent months, while I can only imagine the terror I would still experience if I were to find myself alone with a really large spider. If I happen to see an ordinarily small house spider trotting across the ceiling, I am now able to stand on a chair and kill the beast myself, instead of having to call upon the poor Turnberry to do it for me.
Speaking of large spiders, Dr. Chiron, we have a good number of them in our cellar. I don't think I suffer particularly of arachnophobia, but whenever I go down there and see one of those horrible things, it nearly makes me scream.
You are an admirably brave young woman, Miss Peterson. Your will, your spirit is far stronger than mine. Although, of course, when I say that, I am merely stating the obvious. Earnest at the Haymarket Theatre. I've heard it's really exceptionally done.
I saw it the other week. It was very well done.
Indeed. Tell me, I forget the name of the gentleman who was playing Being Earnest.
His name? I can't remember.
Nicholas Bremerton, wasn't it?
Yes, that's it. Nicholas Bremerton, exactly. I think I've heard of him quite a bit.
Yeah, I saw him in Hamlet before.
Hamlet, yes, that's it. I believe I saw him in Hamlet as well. Thank you, Murdo. Lord Carnoustie, have you ever seen Bremerton in...
No, I have not. But I tell you, I don't understand the English of the Shakespeare. I don't understand.
Well, Lord Carnoustie, if you live in England, you must get used to a little Shakespeare. They perform it all the time, and it is part of our grand history.
Yes, you're right.
You have to give him credit for trying, though. I mean, some people try to avoid the language altogether.
Would anyone care for a game of cards to help in the digestion?
One would have to be mad or a fool to want to play cards with you, Majesty.
I say, Bowmore, do you mean to say that when you introduced me to and challenged me to play cards with Lord Carnoustie a month ago, that you knew ahead of time that I would lose?
Oh, so is that where all my money goes, Murdo?
That was lovely, Ivy. I'm sure I've heard that piece before. What is it? That is, I assume it has a name.
It has a name of sorts. Prelude by Frederick Chopin.
Chopin, of course. And you played it beautifully.
You were very kind, Miss Dragonman.
You know, Miss Chenwick, I really admire the way Dr. Chiron disciplines his nephews. He really puts them in their place without being overly harsh.
To be frank, Mrs. Peterson, I think Dr. Chiron is a little harsh.
Really? And why, pray?
Don't get me wrong. Dr. Chiron is one of the finest gentlemen I know, and Mr. Tomentall's humor is a little coarse.
A little coarse, Miss Dragonwick? Did you not hear Mr. Tomentall and Mr. Murdo Chiron insult the Reverend Money Musk?
Mr. Murdo Chiron did not insult the Reverend. He was merely trying, somewhat foolishly, to be amusing. And on the other hand, yes, Mr. Tomentall was rather insulting, but we must admit, if only to ourselves, that the Reverend is a considerable bore.
Really, Miss Dragonwick, I am shocked to hear you defend those two rapscallions. Their behavior, it just isn't done.
Ah, Mrs. Peterson, you have uttered the very words upon which our society rests. It isn't done. Well, what isn't done quite frequently is done, and more often than not by people you would think of, but by people who seem perfectly respectable. Were the Reverend Money Musk here, Mrs. Peterson, he would tell you that the Bible itself states that all men are created weak. And surely all of us have, at some point in our lives, had thoughts that we wouldn't want shouted out loud. You see, it is my opinion that were there not so many chains of restrictions on what we are allowed to do, there would be less people suddenly snapping those chains and doing things that truly shouldn't be done.
I say, Uncle, Rudolph, this part isn't so bad. I dare say you have consumed enough of it to tell, Willie. I don't think you need any more. Not any more? But Uncle, I seem to have a raging thirst. Surprise me, Willie. However, as you can see, if you can still see, you have managed to drink it all. There's not any more. How sad. Very well, I go. The bell invites me. Here's not, Duncan. Willie, if you start mangling Macbeth, I shall be most displeased. Now, where are you going? I'm going to rescue Ivy from whatever boring talk they may be having in there, and carry her away in my arms, because she is so beautiful. Willie, if you dare make a scene in front of Miss Peterson, Some take delight in the fishing and the fowling. Others take delight in the carriage slowly rolling. But I take delight in the juice of the bottle, and courting pretty women in the mountains of Killarney. Masha ring amador.
Murdo, if you'd be so kind as to assist Turnberry in taking your cousin out into the garden. He clashes horribly with the carpet, and I think some cold, fresh air would help bring him back to reality. Turnberry, kindly help my nephew take Mr. Tomontool out into the garden. I don't care where in the garden, just as long as he gets some fresh air and is relatively out of sight. Not in the pavilion, at any rate.
Of course.
I don't think my sister Lillian knew what she was getting into when she married James Tomontool.
Oh, I say, Dr. Chiron, I've heard a great deal about your library, yet I've never actually seen it. Would you do me the honor of a tour?
Certainly, Beaumont. Would you care to come along, Lord Carnoustie? We could have our brandy and cigars there, if you like.
Grazie, no. I think I'll rest here for a while, perhaps later.
Whenever you wish. This way, Beaumont.
Chiron. Didn't there used to be a fourth mask hanging here?
What? But there is. Now that is curious. It was there earlier today. I shall speak to Christina about this later on, and if she broke it while dusting this afternoon, I shall reprimand her severely. That girl always was airheaded. Oh well. Matter to be dealt with at a later time, Beaumont.
Every inch the doctor's library, I must say.
To a certain extent.
Dante's Divine Comedy.
Oh yes. The Inferno particularly fascinates me.
Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Faust. You are a well-read fellow, aren't you?
Thank you. Ever since I was a child, reading has been a great passion of mine. Of course, the majority of these books relate to my profession. That one particular shelf, however, holds the books which I read for pleasure.
The treasury of Greek mythology, love poems and sonnets of William Shakespeare, great paintings of the world. You are a man of many interests, Chiron.
I would likely go mad if I was stuck on a single path. If you don't mind, old boy, I think I had better ask Christina about that mask now before it slips my mind. In the meantime, you are welcome to delve into any book that catches your eye.
All right, but be easy on the girl. She's intelligent, and intelligent maids are hard to come by in this day and age.
I suppose you're right. I will return momentarily, and should you be tempted, the snuff bottle is at your disposal.
Okay.
Mother, I was thinking I might go out into the garden to get a breath of fresh air. May I?
Of course you may, Ivy, but do not be too long. I would not wish you to catch a cold.
I won't be long. Would you all excuse me for a moment?
Certainly.
By all means, Ivy. A breath of fresh air seems most opportune. I think I'll join you shortly.
By all means, Miss Chiron.
I go. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Ivy, for it is a knell that summons me to heaven or to hell. Whose very soul is penetrated by the cold of the night. Ivy, here in the garden, there is no one to hear you scream.
I swear, Dr. Chiron, I swear I never broke it. I just dusted it like I dusted all of them, but I didn't break it. I didn't even drop it.
Very well, I believe you, Christina. Do not agitate yourself. Perhaps, Willie took it off the wall when I wasn't looking as a prank. Just keep an eye out for it, will you? I should hate to lose it.
I most certainly will, Dr. Chiron. I know how much those antique masks mean to you.
Would you care for a spot of tea, my lord?
No, I would prefer a caffè italiano, per favor.
Certainly, my lord, as soon as I have finished serving the ladies their tea.
Grazie.
Would you care for a spot of tea, Mrs. Peterson?
No, thank you, Turnberry. I think I had better go out into the garden. Ivy has been gone an awfully long time. I wonder what could have happened to her.
Well, Mrs. Peterson, she may have been delayed by coming across Mr. Tomintoul. He was asleep the last time I saw him.
Mr. Tomintoul asleep in the garden?
Yes, well, you see, Mr. Tomintoul had rather too much to drink after dinner and fell asleep. And Dr. Chiron asked me and young Mr. Chiron to take him out into the garden so he could recover his senses.
Well, is he still asleep?
Now, I have no idea. But I imagine were he to be left to sleep, he might sleep for several hours. But if Miss Peterson were to come upon him and wake him...
A drunk Mr. Tomintoul with Ivy in the garden? Oh no, excuse me, Tanbury.
I say, Mrs. Peterson seems to be in a great hurry. Whatever is the matter?
She stepped out in search of Miss Peterson, who went out in the garden some 10 minutes ago.
What? Miss Peterson has gone out into the garden? And Willie? My God, I hope nothing has happened. Turnbury, come with me.
Ivy? Oh my God! Oh my God! Ivy! Ivy! Oh my God! Who did this to you? Tell me.
I don't know. He or oh my God.
Heaven help me. My daughter. Oh, my daughter has been assaulted.
I say, where's everyone going? What the devil?
Oh no. Ivy, not this. Why this?
Oh no,
What's
what?
happening? What's happening?
What,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
Oh no, what's happening?
Goodness.
Are you alright?
He's an Agonia!
Oh, no. Oh,
Peterson.
how could this be? No, it's impossible. What-
Silence, all of you! Making pointless noise will not help.
Miss Peterson, we must take Miss Peterson indoors at once. Turnbury, if you would.
Allow me, Mrs. Peterson.
Please, Mrs. Peterson, be reasonable. We must stand strong in the storm of grief, or it will destroy us all. We cannot allow this tragedy to lead to others. If there is to be any hope of your daughter recovering from this trauma, we must take her indoors. You do believe me, don't you, Mrs. Peterson?
Yes, I do believe you, Dr. Chiron. I do believe you.
Peterson, I know you have been through an ordeal the likes of which I can scarcely imagine. But I know that you have within you the sheer strength of will to pull yourself out of this abyss. If you possibly can, I beg you to describe your assailant to us so he can be brought to justice.
Dr. Chiron, I don't know what he looked like. He wore a long hooded cloak, and his face was covered by a mask.
A mask, Miss Peterson? What sort of mask?
A mask I've seen somewhere before. Somewhere.
This wouldn't be the mask in question, would it, Miss Peterson?
Turnberry, fetch a policeman. Now, at once.
Of course, sir. Right away.
May I ask what the devil's going on here? What's happened? What's happened?
Constable, you must come now, at once. Dr. Chiron's house. There's been a horrible crime.
Here now. Calm down, sir. One word at a time, that's it. Now, what's happened?
Constable, I am Dr. Robert Chiron's butler. A young woman was assaulted a few moments ago at Dr. Chiron's house. And it seems we have the miscreant who did it. You must come at once.
Oh, all right then. Lead on.
Well, sure you don't think it was me.
It's rather hard to tell, considering you were found in the garden with the attacker's mask on your face.
But I'd never lay a finger on Miss Peterson. You know that. Uncle Robert.
Good evening, all. Constable Meldrum, at your service. I hear there has been a young lady assaulted, and the perpetrator of the crime has been discovered.
But it wasn't me, I tell you. It wasn't me.
And who might you be, sir?
Well, Willie Tomintool is my name.
Tomintool, eh? Funny sort of a name, that. Foreigner, are you?
Well, I'm half Irish.
Constable, allow me to explain everything to you.
I should appreciate that very much, Doctor.
Won't you sit down?
Much obliged.
Constable, everyone present this evening had come at my invitation, including Mr. Tomintool, who is my nephew. After we had finished our meal, my nephew, who is what you might call a bon vivant...
A what?
In this case, a man who enjoys good wine rather too much. As I was saying, after dinner, Mr. Tomintool had a few glasses of port too many and fell asleep. Thinking that some cold, fresh air would help bring him back to his senses, I had my butler, Turnberry, carry Mr. Tomintool out into the garden. Having done so, I believe that he returned immediately to the house. Am I not right, Turnberry?
Yes, sir. Quite right.
Shortly thereafter, Mr. Raymond Bowmore, who you see here, asked to view the large collection of volumes in my library, As I led him to the library, Mr. Bowmore noticed that a ceramic mask, which I have had hung on the wall of my house as a decoration for some years, was missing. Thinking that the maid might have broken it, I questioned her, and she assured me that she had no idea what might have happened to it. During this, Miss Ivy Peterson had gone out into the garden for a stroll. Having arrived under the pavilion in the garden, she was approached by a man wearing a hooded cloak and the very ceramic mask that had disappeared. This, I call him a man, for what I would dearly like to call him is not a word I will use in front of Miss Peterson, then proceeded to assault her and disappear into the night. Miss Peterson was shortly afterwards found by her mother, Mrs. Peterson. As the rest of us arrived on the scene of the crime, Mr. Bowmore discovered my nephew, Mr. Tomintoul, lying elsewhere in the garden with the mask upon his face. It was this discovery that caused me to send Turnberry to find you, Constable.
But I didn't do it.
Silence, Willie! Let the constable think.
Answer me one question, if you would, Doctor.
Anything.
In your opinion, would young Tomintoul here have had time to sneak back into the house, take the mask, and return to the garden, all without being noticed?
I think so. It was about 10 o'clock when Mr. Tomintoul was taken out, and Miss Peterson was found roughly 15 minutes later.
Miss Peterson, how long do you think it was after your attacker left before your mother found you?
I have no idea. No idea at all. If I may put in a word, Constable.
Who are you?
Dragonwick. Angelina Dragonwick. I am another friend of Dr. Chiron's. If I remember well, Miss Peterson left the sitting room a few minutes after 10, though she did not go directly to the garden. She first went in search of Turnberry to let her out of the house, though I do not know how long it took her to find Turnberry, nor for him to escort her out of the back door.
I had been in the kitchen since I returned from carrying Mr. Tomintoul out into the garden. Miss Peterson came in at exactly 7 minutes past 10, and it could hardly have taken more than a minute for me to lead her to the back door and for her to leave the house.
7 minutes past 10. You sure about that, are you?
Absolutely sure, Constable. I distinctly remember looking at the clock.
And did you actually see Miss Peterson leave the house?
I certainly did. I let her out of the back door myself. I then returned to the kitchen. I may add that I didn't leave the kitchen again until I went into the sitting room shortly after 15:15.
I see. I see. Was Mr. Tomintoul also wearing the hooded cloak when he was found in the garden?
No, actually. Although it would have been a simple matter for him to dispose of the cloak somewhere else in the garden. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we found it tomorrow in the daylight.
Well now, it seems as if all your statements are pointing in one direction. I will, of course, have to have you repeat your statements before higher authorities. But for now, I'm afraid, Mr. Tomintoul, you will have to accompany me back to the station.
Curse you all! I didn't do it! I didn't do it! I remember falling asleep in the dining room, and the last thing I remember was this great walrus tripping over my arm. Surely, Bowmore, you realize that I was asleep?
Well, it's actually rather hard to say. You definitely weren't making any noise. All I know is that you were lying on a bench and you had your arm sticking out. That's why I tripped over you.
But that doesn't mean anything.
But Signor Tarantula, when you fell asleep in the dining room, you were snoring like a pig.
But why would I be lying on a bench if I were to sleep? Answer me that.
Because perhaps you wanted everyone to think you were still asleep.
But then why didn't I think to remove the mask? Do you think I'd be that stupid?
Not so much stupid, Willie, as not in control.
Come along, sir. You're facing some highly accusing evidence, and your defense until now has been highly flimsy. If you can come up with something better for your trial, so much the better. But for now, come along.
So, Uncle Robert, all your knowledge of men's minds, you can't tell him that I would never do such a thing.
Willie, I, as does everyone else, know that when you are in full control of your actions, you are a fine and decent young man. But under the influence of alcohol or despair, there is no knowing to what depravities any man might sink.
I could expect no less from you, Dr. Chiron. And you, Cousin Murdo, you haven't said a word so far, and you won't say a word now, will you? Will you, Mr. Chiron? And you, Mrs. Peterson, you're only too glad to see me dragged away by the police. You've been hoping I would be for some time, I dare say. And all the rest of you, well, good evening to you all. I'll see you all in hell.
Mother, I can't stay here any longer.
Of course, Sally. We'd better leave.
I think this would be advice for us all to follow. Turnberry, my husband's hat, if you please.
At once, Lady Carnoustie. Should I bring everyone's belongings?
Yes, please.
Per favore.
Lady.
Thank you, Turnberry.
Go on.
Grazie.
I'll have some. Okay. Your hat, sir.
Thank you.
Good night, Uncle Robert.
Murdo, I am truly the foulest slime that has ever crawled on the face of this earth. My own sister's son. To prison.
You did what needed to be done, Uncle. He deserves what he got. Good night.
Good night, nephew. Miss Peterson, I am as you know, a doctor of the mind. Should you require any assistance in recovering from this horrible occurrence, please feel free to come to my home at any hour. It would be the least I could do to help you in any way I can. Free of charge, naturally.
That is most kind of you, Dr. Chiron. I think the world is a much less harsh and cruel place with men such as yourself in it.
You compliment me far beyond what I have ever deserved, Mrs. Peterson.
Oh no, not at all. Ivy, you must try and find some strength, dear. We have yet to get a taxi to take us home.
A taxi? Oh, I won't hear of it. Miss Peterson is still suffering from shock. Rest is what she needs. Turnberry will take you home in my motor car. Oh, I'm sorry. Please allow me, Miss Peterson.
Oh, Dr. Chiron, I'm sorry, Dr. Chiron. Your hands are warmer than mine. The contrast was slightly startling. Dr. Chiron, I can never thank you enough for what you've already done for me. Knowing that I have you to help me, it gives me strength.
I promise that I will do all that I humanly can to help you, Miss Peterson. And I was perfectly serious when I said you could come here at any hour at all.
I won't forget. Thank you, Doctor.
Turnberry, could you take the Petersons home, please?
Of course, sir.
Oh, Turnberry, one more thing. Yes. When you return, take the mask outdoors and smash it into 1,000 pieces.
Yes.